Welcome to our channel. We are sincerely trying to choose interesting stories, so we would really like to see your subscription.
I'm a 33-year-old man who was engaged to a 28-year-old woman, and for clarity, let me share our backstory. We'll call her Kylie for the sake of this article. Kylie and I met at a friend's engagement party, where she caught my eye with her stunning looks, blonde hair, tall, and beautifully slender. Her great sense of humor kept me entertained throughout the party, and soon after we started dating. I was captivated, and I knew I wanted to spend my life with her. After proposing to Kylie and suggesting she move in with me, I sensed some hesitation on her part. I thought it might be due to her desire to maintain independence. Despite this, I spent more time at her apartment in the city than she did at my suburban house, which was almost paid off. I didn't mind, as it allowed us to spend nights together without the commute. Kylie, being a nurse, had late shifts, and on those nights I stayed alone in her apartment. I understood her reluctance to move in, considering the privileges she'd have to give up. Commuting without a car in the city would be challenging for her. Although she suggested I move in with her, my mortgage was nearly paid, and her apartment was too small for both of us. When COVID hit, the lockdown prompted Kylie to move in with me. As an essential worker, she was mostly away, while I, a software engineer, worked from home. Our wedding plans were put on hold due to the pandemic. Meanwhile, my father, with whom I wasn't particularly close, flew in for the wedding. Stuck due to the circumstances, he leased Kylie's apartment, which was still vacant. It's crucial to note that my relationship with my father wasn't strong, given that he had walked out on my mom and me when I was a teenager. Despite the resentment I initially felt, he provided child support, and over time I grew past the bitterness. He showed up at my mom's funeral during college, expressing a willingness to cater to my needs, even if I chose to stay with my stepfather. My stepfather was fine with me continuing to stay, and my father continued supporting my living expenses until I completed college. We would meet when he flew into town for dinner or lunch, often with different women who seemed to be my age or younger. While I didn't entirely approve, I also didn't care. I considered it none of my business. He wasn't in a committed relationship or married. Providing context to my relationship with my dad, I'll now continue with my story. When lockdown restrictions were lifted, Kylie decided to quit her job, seeking a career transition into tech due to burnout. With my six-figure salary, I could cover both our living expenses effortlessly. To support her, I offered to cover her living costs, and she paid for her classes independently. Once she started staying home with me, I arranged a workplace next to mine for her, facilitating her attendance at classes. We spent a considerable amount of time together, occasionally inviting my dad over for dinner. He decided to stay in the same city as me, a decision I didn't mind as he wasn't intrusive. Later, I discovered it was due to his new serious girlfriend. For context, my dad is wealthy, having inherited significant shares and holding a high-ranking position in a multinational company. As I adjusted to my new lifestyle, I received a promotion, though I still worked from home, occasionally going into the office. Returning home, I found comfort in Kylie's company, and our relationship became intimate. However, Kylie felt cooped up and decided to get a part-time job at her old workplace as a temp nurse. While not taking as many shifts, she earned more than before. She continued with online classes but reduced their frequency. 3 months into her job, she complained about exhaustion and started coming home with expensive purchases. Initially, I didn't find her purchases suspicious, attributing them to her love for shopping, which she had before we got engaged. She would starve herself for designer clothes and shoes, suggesting she could afford them without worrying about living expenses. Gradually, she increased her work shifts until her schedule mirrored its pre-adjustment state. Unfortunately, our off days no longer aligned, and she left for work while I was still asleep, returning just before I went to bed. Despite our conflicting schedules, we managed to find time for intimacy. 6 months into her job, we began planning our wedding. To prioritize wedding preparations, she significantly reduced her workload. Busy with my job, I trusted her decisions and went along with her plans. Then, one joyous night, she announced her pregnancy. Overjoyed, I celebrated by buying her gifts and dining with my dad and his enthusiastic girlfriend. Kylie decided to quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom, and I supported her decision. Financially stable after paying off the mortgage, life was good. I'd return from work to hear about her day and wedding preparations. Unbeknownst to me, she was also spending considerable time with my dad, whom she portrayed as an amiable connection. My suspicions arose when I noticed frequent calls and texts between Kylie and my dad. Despite her supposed financial constraints, she continued to bring home luxury items. When I confronted her, she claimed my father sought her advice for gifts. However, a receipt in her purse revealed he had purchased expensive items with her guidance. I grew skeptical, as my dad wouldn't spend extravagantly on my fiancée for mere advice. Realizing they spent almost every day together, I decided to investigate. I installed a GPS tracker in her car and discreetly placed cameras in our home. Initially, the surveillance yielded little as she visited routine places like the doctor and the supermarket. I patiently waited, expecting that something unusual would eventually happen. The opportunity presented itself when Kylie left her phone at home during a quick store run. Though I knew her password, I hesitated to check her phone without a valid reason. However, I noticed she had changed the password. Returning her phone, I waited for another chance, studying her for a week to discover the new password successfully. When she left the phone unattended on the coffee table during a bath, I seized the opportunity. Going through her messaging app revealed little, but her social media apps, particularly WhatsApp, uncovered the shocking truth. Kylie had been sending risky pictures to my father with a suggestive message indicating they were involved behind my back. The following days were agonizing, prompting me to take a work leave and escape to clear my mind through camping. The night before my departure, I spotted Kylie's phone and hatched a plan. Installing an app to monitor her messages in real time, I set up notifications for her WhatsApp activity. Checking her phones remotely, I observed her texting my father immediately after I left the house. 2 hours later, I witnessed my father's arrival through the security cameras I had installed. Kylie greeted him affectionately, wearing the lingerie I had gifted her for Valentine's Day, a set she hadn't worn in my presence. Devastated, I resolved that both of them must face consequences for their betrayal. Recording their affair discreetly, I stored the file in my cloud, ensuring Kylie remained oblivious to my knowledge. Abandoning alcohol, I focused on devising a plan to expose and ruin them. With 3 months left before our planned wedding date, I knew I had to act swiftly to prevent marrying her again. Returning home on the third day after my break, I found no signs of my father's presence. Kylie greeted me enthusiastically, attempting to initiate intimacy, but my repulsion toward her grew stronger, making it clear that being in the same room was unbearable. I observed her as she slept that night, contemplating how she could deceitfully lie to my face. My scrutiny of the room revealed new items, things I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been vigilant. A winter coat, clearly beyond her financial means, caught my eye, and I suspected my father's involvement in obtaining it for her. While she peacefully slept, thoughts of harming her crossed my mind, tempting yet restrained. Further investigation into her messages revealed communication with 3 other men before my father entered the picture, older, affluent individuals. My scrutiny extended to her phone, exposing explicit videos of her engaging in intimate acts with these men. Surprisingly, her last interaction with any of them occurred before moving into my house. It dawned on me that her initial refusal to live with me was a calculated move to maintain privacy for her liaisons with other men. The discovery shed light on her eagerness to take extra shifts and return to work soon after retirement. It also explained the extravagant purchases she brought home. Ironically, I had often indulged her with expensive gifts, oblivious to her duplicitous actions and trying to fulfill her desires. I documented the messages, took screenshots, and printed them out. I concealed the incriminating videos, including the one involving my father. The initial step of my revenge was to make her financially reliant on me. Feigning remorse, I informed her of my intention to pay more attention to her and the baby, shouldering the financial burden. I showered her with gifts, creating a false sense of security. Buying her things at random, I instructed her to stop spending her money, exploiting her greed. She agreed, unaware of my underlying motives. Meanwhile, I persuaded my father to invest in a new apartment in the city, supposedly for his girlfriend. Unbeknownst to her, my father's deceit was concealed and he planned to propose. I embraced the opportunity to add a twist to my scheme. As I spent more time with Kylie, she continued communicating with my father, meeting up discreetly. Though I witnessed it all in real time, I kept silent. At that point, I wasn't consumed by heartbreak. My sole desire was to subject them to the torment they had put me through. My dad found a new place and left Kylie's apartment. Persuading her to sell it, I suggested a long-term investment by buying cryptocurrency. Unfortunately, the chosen coin was unstable and heading towards obsolescence. Handling the transaction, I discovered Kylie was nearly broke, surviving on gifts from sugar daddies instead of money. As I continued gathering evidence, my father sought permission to propose to his real girlfriend at the rehearsal dinner. The pronouns I collected formed a substantial narrative, and I approached a publisher to turn the printouts into small books, titled Sugar Baby Kylie. Anticipating around 30 guests at the wedding rehearsal, I included the book in the gift bags. The wedding planner, after reading it, turned red, and I warned her not to disclose it to Kylie if she wanted her bonus. I also instructed her to cancel all wedding bookings as the event wouldn't happen. Successfully recovering money from vendors, I created a video montage with special effects. Speaking to my father's girlfriend, I revealed the truth and begged her to wait until I completed my revenge. During the wedding rehearsal, as my father proposed, a shocking video played in the background, leaving the audience horrified. I left without Kylie, who found her belongings outside the house, keys changed, and passcode altered. Sending her a clear message the next day, I stated my desire for no further contact and insisted on a DNA test once the baby was born. I blocked my father on all platforms, sold my house, and bought an apartment, ensuring no contact. In an update 9 months later, Kylie contacted me through my lawyer for a DNA test, revealing I'm not the father, concluding this chapter of my life. It's been 3 months since this incident, and the memories still linger, haunting me. I've decided to share this story with you. My old school friend Thomas reached out, expressing his desire to visit our hometown. Having left right after school for the big city, he'd stayed there and communication ceased for a while. With cell phones, our conversations resumed and he called wanting to come. Excited about the prospect of reuniting with an old friend, I invited him to stay with us. My wife Sue, our 3-year-old daughter, and me. Initially hesitant, my wife agreed to host him. We rearranged our living situation, moving our daughter into our bedroom while allocating a separate room for Thomas. To give him a warm welcome, I booked a table at a cozy bar on his arrival day. Meeting him at the train station felt as if no time had passed, and we had much to catch up on after 12 years. Eager to spend a long evening at the bar, we sent our daughter to my parents. The evening was delightful, filled with laughter and stories. However, the drinks took a toll, and we ended up drunk. Thomas had to escort us home, and I vaguely recall falling a few times. The next morning, with a terrible headache, I went to buy beer. Waking them up, we had a few drinks, and everyone felt better. We explored the town, revisiting childhood spots and old houses, and Thomas was the life of the company. Due to my work, I couldn't accompany him during the day, making the week pass by quickly. On Friday, he had to leave, and I promised to drive him to the train station, or at least say goodbye in the morning. I dropped my daughter at daycare, aiming to leave work early. Thomas called at 11 a.m., ready and waiting, but I was swamped with tasks. He suggested a taxi, but I insisted on seeing him off personally. Rushing home after a colleague offered help with my urgent report, I arrived half an hour early. However, entering the apartment, I discovered an unexpected and distressing scene involving my wife and Thomas. I can barely recall the events that unfolded next. Everything was a blur, and my vision was clouded with intense rage. In that moment, consumed by fury, I seized the first object within reach, a thin wooden cane belonging to my father-in-law. The lovers, engrossed in their act, remained oblivious as I approached them. The initial blow landed on my wife, striking her head. She screamed and recoiled, biting the lover hard in response. He, now in pain, jumped up, pants down, attempting to find an exit. Driven by an uncontrollable fury, I continued striking my cheating wife on her backside with the cane before shifting my attention to her lover. Despite the evident agony from my wife's bite, I couldn't halt myself. I was overwhelmed by rage. My wife cried and wept, and her expressions were unclear. Whether conveying pain, pleading for forgiveness, or blaming him, it didn't matter. Both were guilty betrayers. Thomas tried to shield himself, screaming and attempting to explain, blaming my wife for the situation. But at that moment, their justifications held no significance. Having driven him to the hallway with cane strikes, I grabbed him by the collar and forcefully threw him down the stairwell with his pants still down. Following that, I tossed his bag onto him as I confronted my former friend. As my wife managed to reach the bedroom and dress, I resisted a strong urge to harm her further. Summoning all my strength, I confronted her, questioning why she had betrayed me. Initially, attempting to scream and reproach me, she eventually confessed how it all began. It started on the day Thomas arrived. They got drunk, and she made the guest bed. She allowed him to undress her in a drunken haze, leading to their intimate encounter. The next morning, they pretended as if nothing had occurred, spending the day together. However, when I went to work on Monday, they discussed their night together, leading to more illicit encounters throughout the week. Hearing all this left me speechless, and I regarded her with a cold, distant gaze. Realizing it wouldn't end peacefully, she gathered her belongings and left to stay with her parents, taking our daughter with her. I sought legal advice to secure custody of my daughter after the impending divorce. Unfortunately, given her young age, she is likely to stay with her mother. In one swift moment, I lost an old friend, my spouse, and my daughter. Everything built over the years crumbled. My once loving wife became a stranger, a repulsive figure. While I haven't initiated divorce proceedings, we are living separately. I aim to take custody of my daughter, as she is all I have left. My reluctance to file for divorce immediately is due to the current circumstances. I want to shield my beloved daughter from becoming like her mother and fear she may be turned against me in the future. I'm not seeking to deprive her of her mother. She will eventually understand the truth on her own.